Let's check out this game. Magnus opens with the reti, knight f3. Fabi counters with also the reti, knight f6. We have pawn to c4, pawn to b6, and now knight to c3. This transposes into some English. We have bishop to b7 and pawn to d4, pawn to e6 and pawn to a3, stopping bishop to b4, but also preparing b4 in the future. We have knight e4. Fabi goes for the early trade of knights at eliminate more material from the board and get closer to that draw, as a draw in Armageddon means a win. Pawn to e3, bishop to e7, and bishop to d3. So it's not a new position. There are quite a couple of games, quite a few games in this exact same setup. Castles by both of them, and now pawn to d6, pawn to b4. And okay, still a couple of games with this exact same position. For example, Lopambeli played queen, or rather, Vasily Vanchuk had the black piece. He played queen to c8 against Lopambeli here, and the game ended in a draw. But here, Fabi goes knight to d7, and it is not as of move 11 that we have a completely new game. So okay, rook to d1, centralizing the rook, pawn to a5. We have bishop to b2, so the rook is now nicely defended. A captures on b4, a captures, and queen to b8. We have queen to e4, putting pressure on the rook, but not really. It is sufficiently defended. And now Fabi throws in a pawn to d5. It looks like he's gambiting the pawn, but not really. It comes with a tactic. C captures on d5, and now knight f6 attacks the queen and the pawn, so Fabi just wins his pawn back. Queen to c2, and now e captures on d5. We have knight d5 by Magnus. Excellent square for the knight. A lot of activity there. And bishop to d6. We have pawn to b5, keeping that pawn on c7. So now it's a backwards pawn, and it will be a target for the rest of the game. Queen to e8 by Fabi, going after the b5 pawn. Rook captures, queen captures, and now rook to a1, grabbing hold of the a file once again. Fabi again goes after the b5 pawn, and Magnus offers a queen trade. So you can't really accept this. Magnus would be a bit too active, perhaps. The engine, of course, says it's a draw, but the engine says everything it's a draw, it looks like. Once the rook comes to a7 could be a little bit dangerous. But it is very similar to what happens in the game. Only Fabi avoids the queen trade. Rook to a7. And now pawn to h5. You don't have to worry about any queen captures on b6. The bishop here nicely defends the queen, and also the c7 pawn. So this bishop is the real defender of Fabi's position, and Magnus will have to trade it off at some point. We have pawn to h3, rook to d8, queen back to c1 by Magnus. Now, with ideas of bishop to a3, queen to a6. We have knight to c6, and now rook to e8, getting off of the square attack by the knight. Bishop to a3, attacking the bishop on d6, and now knight e4. Magnus trades off the dark squared bishops. The bishop captures, queen captures, and now knight back to e5. The pressure is again on the c7 pawn, so it has to be defended. Rook to c8 and pawn to f3 now. Magnus was criticized a little bit by this move, but it's Armageddon. Fabi's low on time, and he has to make decisions. We have knight to g3, queen to a1. Now, even with options of trading rooks if needed, pawn to f6 by Fabi. Challenging the knight, it weakens the black king's position, but the e5 square is too strong to allow the knight to remain there. Knight to d3, knight to c6 also possible, even knight to g6 is possible, but Magnus goes knight to d3, and now pawn to h4. I believe as Fabi is playing for a draw here, that's why h4 was played. If he was playing for a win, he would probably go after the e3 pawn with the rook. So pawn to h4 and king to f2. We have king h7, queen to b1 now, threatening some nasty discoveries here, but Fabi boldly goes rook to e8. He says there are no nasty discoveries here, and it's the truth. If let's say knight f4, you just stop it with f5, and nothing is happening here. So after rook e8, we have queen to c2, again pressuring the c7 pawn, which is the real weakness of black's position. Rook to e7 defending, and now knight to e5 with check. So knight to e4, we've reached a position from the thumbnail. Both knights are just hanging in the center of the board. F captures on e4, F captures on e5, and E captures on d5. A beautiful discovery. Pawn to e4 blocking the queen, and now king to g1. Magnus spots the threat. If he plays something like queen to c6, then queen h2, and you just get checkmated very quickly. So instead, king g1, stopping queen h2. Now comes queen captures on d5 and rook captures on c7. We have a capture fast here, captures, and now queen to f4. Magnus attacking the e4 and h4 pawns, and the only move that holds this for Fabi is queen to d3, but he doesn't find it. The idea is that after queen to d3, okay, we give up this pawn with check, but now the e3 pawn is saying, so you have to defend it, and now you start marching the b pawn down the board, and you might even give it up to capture on e3 with check, create a passed e pawn, and so on. It will be sufficient resources to force a draw. But here we have queen to b1 with check, king to h2, and now pawn to b5 by Fabi. But now just queen to h4 check, king to g6, king to g8 a bit more resilient. Fabi goes for king to g6. And now pawn to d5. The pass pawn of Magnus is also marches forward. Queen to d3. So you cannot advance the pawn to d6. But now Magnus will use some shrewd maneuvering to get his queen into position. Queen g4 check, king h7, queen to f5 with check, g6, queen to f7 with check, king to h6, and queen to f8 with check. This is how Magnus gains control over the b6 square. So king to h7 and pawn to d6. Fabi also advances his pawn to b4, queen to e7 with check, nicely controlling the two squares needed for the queening, king to h6 and pawn to d7, and he was in this position on whom 52 that Fabiano Caruana lost on time, and also he would probably resign here if he didn't, because there's nothing more to be done here. I mean, next move you get a queen, doesn't matter what you play, there's no move, there are no checks, there are no tricks, it's a few moves to checkmate here. So yeah, brilliant stuff by both of them, but Magnus wins this one, which means that Hikaru can only catch up to him if he beats Pragnananda in classical. Their game is still being played as I'm recording this. I will check now just in case something happened. You know, I don't wanna trick you guys. Let me just see real quickly. Oh, yeah, still being played, still being played, and still roughly equal, but it's a crazy position. Hikaru is now he equalized. He's no longer down a pawn. Yeah, it's equal material, bishop versus knight. It doesn't seem like there's a way for Prag to actually lose this, but Hikaru will try. And if Hikaru does it, he will force tiebreaks against Magnus Carlsen. And if you don't hear from me, that means Magnus won the tournament. But if you hear from me, that means that he may have won or may have not won, but we will have tiebreaks and see if maybe Hikaru wins the tournament. So that's the game. Hope you guys enjoyed it. As usual, very nice play by Magnus. He beats Fabi again in a queen and pawn endgame, as he did in the first half of the tournament. Only there he did in classical. So yeah, it's not Magnus is just really good at these. I mean, queen endgames are the hardest endgames possible. It's impossible to learn them. You can study them all you want, but it will still be, when you're playing against a strong opponent, it will be